As Guo Jing improves his martial arts skills, Yang Kang finds his allegiances torn. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today, I want to talk about a book that I read, one that is technically part of one singular book, but when it was adapted into the English language, it was split into 4 different books. And today's book is all about martial arts warriors and deadly training manuals. I am referring to A Bond Undone by Jin Yong, which was written in 1957 as part of the Legend of the Condor Heroes series, or book, and it was translated by Gigi Chang. For those who don't know, Jin Yong was a Chinese writer who lived in the 1900s. He was known for writing sort of historical fantasy type series, martial arts, Wu Jin, I believe it is called, where just martial arts stories, maybe anachronistic at times. The Legend of the Condor Heroes book is probably what he's most associated with. And he wrote spiritual successors for that, but as also standalone type series. And again, he is well regarded there. I can't seem to find out too much about Gigi Chang. She appears to be like Anna Wormwood in that she translated this work into like a couple different like other books. And into like a little bit of a series. She's done a lot of translation work as far as I can see, but it doesn't appear that she has any like books to her own name beyond being a translator. Which you could argue that writing this is like writing a book in and of itself, because you have to translate it and make sure that it flows smoothly. But that's another question entirely. And to get more information about Jin Yong, I do highly suggest you check out my Hero Born video that I made, where I go into him with a little bit more detail, as there's some more information there. But without further ado, let's talk about A Bond Undone. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So A Bond Undone picks up where A Hero Born left off. Lotus Huang, Guo Jing are the sort of main character, and Ironheart Yang have infiltrated a Zhen castle that is the home of Wanyan Hongli, Prince Hongli. They are looking for Yang Kang, who is Ironheart's son, and Charity Bao, who is Ironheart's wife, who were kidnapped years ago by the Jin people. Lotus Huang is fighting Tiger Peng, a Jin martial arts warrior, and his associates. They prove to be too powerful, so she flees. And then Guo Jing heads into the sewers, where he accidentally runs across Cyclone Mei. She is one of Yang Kang's shifus, but she's also someone he ran into in the previous book. The Guo Jing and the 7 freaks managed to kill her husband, and she views Guo Jing as responsible. And so she wants to kill him, but she stops herself short of doing that. A little bit of a conscious thing there. And then we learn a little bit about a backstory and who she was and how she arrived at this place. It's very interesting. The 7 freaks show up, as I mentioned before, and they have a fight with Cyclone Mei, as well as Tiger Peng. Ironheart Yang and Charity Bao show up as well. And a big fight ensues that is stopped by Yang Kang, who is demanding to know why they're fighting his shifu. And at that point, Ironheart Yang and Charity Bao plead for Yang to rejoin the family, but he doesn't want to do that. And Ironheart Yang and Charity Bao kill themselves as a means of sending a message to him, which is very weird. But even worse, it doesn't even seem to work. He's fully committed to not caring about these people. The Seven Freaks and the Tiger Peng's men agree to a fight in the future, and the Seven Freaks want Guo Jing to marry Mercy Mu, who is Ironheart Yang's goddaughter, but he's already betrothed to Genghis Khan's daughter, and he has a thing for Lotus Huang as well, and so they just decide to abscond and run away, and over the next couple of months they grow closer, they become better warriors as they're training themselves, and they run into another martial arts warrior called Count Seven Hong. He views Guo Jing as a bit of a dullard, not very talented, but he still teaches Guo Jing some martial arts skills, which makes him a better fighter, more disciplined. We also see Mercy Mu, again, who has feelings for Yang Kang. Although Yang Kang doesn't really seem interested in her, is more focused on upper class women and such. And later we see that Yang Kang has been taken by lake pirates. He tries to fight them off, but he's not really successful, although he is later freed and whatnot. We also see Qiu Qianren, who is a part of the Quanzhen sect, sort of friends with the Taoist Chuji, who doesn't really show up much in this story. He talks about the Nine Yin Manual, which is a very valuable martial arts tome that was stolen by Cyclone May and Hurricane Chen, and like whoever has it is particularly skilled, and a lot of people want to claim it. Apothecary Huang had it last, but it appears that Apothecary Huang is dead. As Qianren says, this upsets Lotus as Apothecary Huang is her father, but it's later revealed that this was all some sort of trick. And then at that point, Cyclone May shows up and demands to fight Guo Jing again. Guo Jing gets the upper hand, and at that point, Apothecary Huang actually does show up and proceeds to fight Guo Jing in order to prove that his martial arts skills are more are better, because Cyclone May comes from, he taught Cyclone May, and if she loses, that looks bad for him. Apothecary Huang manages to get Guo Jing to surrender and pledges to kill him, which Guo Jing manages to get him to not do that in exchange for letting him go avenge his father, Sky Fury Guo, who was killed in the previous story. And so he's got that permission to do that, and he travels with Yang Kang, who kind of repents for betraying the Jin people at that point. And they agree to work together. They track down Justice Duan, who we saw as somewhat responsible in the previous book, who immediately sells out Wanyan Hong Li, who is like Yang Kang's father. And Guo Jing wants to go defeat him, but Yang Kang is hesitant, and Lotus sees him as a bit of a weak point for them. If they bring him along, he might betray them, and even he absconds later and doesn't really help them. And a short while later, Guo Jing and Lotus run into Gallant Wang, one of Tiger Peng's men, and manage to beat him up, but he runs away again. And at that point, Lotus Huang wants to go to Peach Blossom Island to visit her father. When they get there, Apothecary Huang separates them so that Lotus and Guo Jing can't be together, because he doesn't want them to be together. He views Guo Jing as a bit of an idiot and whatnot. And as Guo Jing is walking around the island being separated, he runs into a man named Zhu Butong, who's kind of a little bit of a wild, crazy man. And he tells Guo Jing the history of the Nine Yin Manual, and even tricks him into learning from the manual as well, which Guo Jing didn't want, because he thought the manual was a bit evil. And at that point, he makes his way back to Apothecary Huang's home on the island, where he learns that Viper and Venom Uang want to marry Lotus Huang and consolidate the families. Count Seven Hong shows up, and he fights on Guo Jing's behalf, but no victor is decided, and Apothecary Huang decides to put Guo Jing and Venom Uang through some trials in order to decide who gets to marry Lotus Huang. Guo Jing wins the first trial, the second one is a draw, and the third one is more about reciting passages from the Nine Yin Manual, which Guo Jing didn't realize that he was actually reading from, and so he actually wins. At that point, Botong shows up again, and he's a little bit of a prankster, so he's like, I don't want Guo Jing to get married. He read from the Nine Yin Manual willingly, he's evil like that. And Apothecary Huang is mad, says that he can't marry Lotus Huang, and separates them once again. At that point, Count Seven Hong, Bo Tong, and Guo Jing head on a boat to leave the island. But as the story comes to a close, we learn from Apothecary Huang that boat is a doomed ship, essentially, built specifically to fail so that Apothecary Huang could be with his wife in the future. Lotus hears about this, and as the story comes to a close, she rushes off to go save Guo Jing, and that's where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit worth talking about with this story. One of the main themes that Jin Yong seems to be touching upon is reputation. Yang here shows that reputation matters greatly to these martial artists. It's very important that they're viewed positively by the general public, but also by their other martial arts warriors. If they appear weak, then that they lose face, which is a concept mostly in Asian cultures. It does appear to be a thing in Western cultures too, but not to a great extent. Essentially, you have face, like your reputation amongst others, and if you lose face, that's disgraceful and whatnot. And so you see a lot of characters trying to save face in a variety of ways, surrendering without appearing to be weak or anything like that, and appearing honorable to others whenever possible. A lot of this depends on determining who is the best. That's why all these martial arts warriors are fighting. And if someone that you trained takes a loss, that looks bad on you, which you don't want. And you see that especially with Apothecary Huang in the story. When Guo Jing manages to defeat Cyclone Mei, or get the upper hand against her, Apothecary Huang is like, no, I have to step in so that my kung fu school doesn't look weak, doesn't take a hit there. And so he interferes and then manages to get Guo Jing to surrender, which makes him look good. Guo Jing doesn't look good, but he's also a bit dull and doesn't realize that he should be not surrendering or anything like that. And so reputation doesn't matter as much to Guo Jing as it appears to matter to other people. And this whole reputation thing can be used against your enemies. You can appeal to their sense of reputation and use it to gain an upper hand against them, or you can use it to get them to go soft on you so you can strike at them later, or you can just avoid dying or something like that. A lot of trickery taking place in this story, which I like how Jin Yong does. Some characters feel like pranksters, like Zhu Butong is a giant prankster, but like trickster gods or something like that. It feels like that's some aspect of what he's getting at in this story too. And then there's a sense of private versus public reputation. Whereas in public, you want the general public to view you positively. If a fight were to take place in public, or even in private, but word got out, that matters. If you lose those fights, your reputation goes down and you won't become as much as a legendary figure. Legacy seems to matter a lot to many of these characters. Whereas there's also a sense of private reputation where characters don't mind losing sometimes if no one's going to find out about it. And some characters have issues with cheating in public, but if in private they're willing to cheat in some fights in order to gain an upper hand. After all, if you win a fight but you do it by cheating and your opponent is dead because you used poison needles, and that nobody can really report that, you haven't really suffered a loss of reputation there. That happens with Viper and Venom Wang in the story, as they cheat a little bit in order to win fights, but no one ever really knows about that. So there's a difference in how they handle their reputation, and as well as how honorable they are depending on that situation. And again, this is an extension of honor in the story. If you lose reputation, you lose honor, and so you're willing to do anything to maintain that. And there's even plans to strike back or do cheap shots in order to avoid losing. Because again, if you do it in private, it doesn't matter. But even if you do it in public, eventually people will forget, or all your enemies will be dead, and then it doesn't matter that you cheated, because who's going to complain about it? They're all dead. So I do like how Jin Yong is writing reputation here as an extension of honor, which I talked about in the previous story. It's funny that Guo Jing doesn't really ascribe to the reputation too much. But you see how important it is to other characters and how they're willing to kill or maim their opponents to maintain that and be seen as a heroic or legendary figure. It's also important to talk about Yang Kang, and specifically the decision that he makes in this story. Kang is torn between loyalty to the Song Empire and loyalty to Wanyan Hongli, the Prince Hongli. He's loyal to the Song because that's where his father was from. They're like a specific people who are fighting against the Jin Empire, and the Jin seems to have an upper hand. So he's loyal to his father, his family there, but he was also raised by Prince Hongli. Because he was essentially kidnapped at that point, and his family was brought up in that home. And so, like, he is loyal to Prince Hongli, and he no matter how much he's told that, you know, Hongli is unjust or that Hongli kidnapped him, you were raised by this, and you were raised well, and you were afforded many opportunities coming from a very wealthy family. So you wouldn't really want to lose that. And so Yang Kang is torn in that way. The clearest sign that we see that he's making a choice in this story, that he's choosing one side over another, is that he rejects his father. At the beginning of the story, Ironheart Yang's like, you were kidnapped, come back to the family, rejoin, and be honorable here. And Yang Kang's like, no, I don't want to. I belong here. This is what matters most to me. And so in that way, it's pretty clear that he's made a decision to be allied with the Zhen people, and therefore to side against Guo Jing, even if he doesn't necessarily intend to be against Guo Jing there. I don't think there's an actual decision about that until maybe later in the story here. The truth does make things a little bit murky for Yang Kang once he finds out, and as he's traveling with Guo Jing and realizing that from Justice Duan and learning that Hong Li kidnapped him and also hurt the family, like he specifically targeted Sky Fury and Ironheart to further the goals of the Jin Empire. Like, once he learns that, things are kind of murky, and he has to make a choice of whether to help Guo Jing in getting justice, avenging his dead father, or siding with the Jin Empire. And unfortunately, he makes a pretty rash decision there based on his upbringing and whatnot. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. Even though he now understood that he was no blood relation of the sixth prince, he had always been treated as his own. He was raised as son and heir. This man was the only father Yang Kang had ever known, and his fortunes would always be bound with his. And there you see Yang Kang making a decision, and this is at a point where Yang Kang sees Wanyan Hongli around, and he has an opportunity to tell Guo Jing and help him avenge his dead father, and he ultimately decides not to do that. And that's a very short quote, but it gets at the feeling there. Like, Yang Kang could help Guo Jing, but this man raised him, and more so than that, he afforded him a lot of opportunities than he probably would have gotten with just Ironheart Yang. And so here we see, like, Zhang making it pretty clear that Yang is choosing money, wealth, and this perceived past that he has, rather than the actual case, the actual truth of him being Ironheart's son. And so, like, he does a good job of sort of, like, it's very, you don't see it happen often, but, like, in those moments where Yang is focused, we see him making a decision that'll have ramifications for quite some time in this story. And it kind of hurts, because you know this is ultimately going to pit him against Guo Jing, and two people who should have been sworn brothers are going to end up perhaps fighting, perhaps killing one another. It's not ideal. It's pretty sad, but it is quality writing there. Another thing that Yang does pretty well here is Guo Jing's character development as well as his physical improvement. We saw in the first book that he was gaining some skills, but he wasn't that great. He still couldn't beat, pretty tough martial arts warriors. He was really getting lucky more often than not. But in this book, we see him vastly improving his skills, dedicating his craft. He's a bit slow to learn. It's a running joke that he's so incompetent at times. Apothecary Huang can't even stand him. He's still capable of fighting. He's still capable of learning. He just does it in his own way. And I really like how Yang does that. It feels different than most characters, whereas most martial arts warriors in other books are innately talented and Guo Jing has to work at it. And that's very relatable. No one is just automatically great at something. It's a struggle to get there most of the time, which is, again, pretty quality writing. I also like how May's backstory is depicted. She was pretty one-dimensional in the previous book, just serving as a villain. But here we see a little bit about her backstory and her interactions with Apothecary Huang, which is pretty sad. And also you get a little bit of insight into the Nine Yin Manual as well. The Nine Yin Manual making May and Chen, her husband, pretty terrifying adversaries to fight, and also making them a little bit evil. And so you have to wonder, now that Guo Jing knows about the Nine Yin Manual, what's that going to do to his kung fu? And also, is that going to upset his morality at all? I personally have doubts, but the learning insight into May's background and whatnot has allowed us to sort of understand and potentially fear what's going to happen to Guo Jing and company. Of course, there's a few problems with Bond Undone, and one of it just has to do with the fact that there are long sections of people just talking in this story. It felt like in the previous book it flowed more smoothly with you get backstory, but you also get pretty cool fighting scenes and a lot of world building here. And here there doesn't appear to be as much as that. There's a couple fight scenes, but they're spread out, and it's mostly just characters talking about the past, talking about people who lived before, and it's interesting, but it does kind of drag on the story a little bit, makes it a little bit difficult to enjoy. And ultimately, I think it's weird that they chose to break up the story into 4 separate parts, because you end up with stuff like this, because this is just one entire story in the original Chinese. And here you break it up into 4 stories, you're bound to have those sections that drag, and those sections that drag are going to be those entire books. Perhaps it might get more exciting in future stories, but it's really tough to justify going through this series if I know that one entire book is just going to drag on and it won't be as fun or enthralling as the first book. So it is a bit of a struggle to get through there, and I do think a lot of that has to do with how they chose to break up the story. Anyway, those are my thoughts on A Bond Undone by Jin Yong. Pretty good story. Certainly not as exciting as the first one, but it definitely does have its moments, and the use of comedy and characters in this, and really compelling characters, but also funny characters, really helps add to it. So I think, obviously read the first book and then maybe come visit this one. But again, this one is a bit of a slog, so I don't know if it's completely worth it, but it is a lot of fun to read, and it is a very diverse, worldly kind of experience to read Chinese literature, at least more than just American literature, which I feel is always thrust upon me. It's hard to find Asian literature out there that is accessible in this kind of way. Thanks again to Lucas from Strike the Sun MD, who recommended this to me. The first book was good, and the second book obviously had its moments, but I hope the rest of the series is fascinating and enthralling too. If you have any thoughts on what I said here, any comments about my review, let me know in the comments below. Would love to hear from you, or simply just have a conversation. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this book or this author if they don't already know. Also, join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about Bond Undone or this series at large, or other forms of media as well. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and manual stealing travels. Farewell.